Well, it's time to start reassembling things, and I'm going to start by reassembling the diaphragm, the aperture blades. So this plate, this is the retainer plate, and one side we're interested in is the flat side, the smooth side. The other side here has got 5 little indentations. That's to do with where the shutter blades actually swing. We're not interested in that side, we're interested in the flat side. And I have to lay out my 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 diaphragm blades. They're laid out in a circle. Each overlays the one before it. When you get back to the start, you have to pull back the first blades to be able to lay the final blades in position. The blades are not symmetrical. The pins on the blades are closer to the centre of the end of the blade at one end and closer to the edge of the blade on the other. The pin closer to the centre of the blade goes into this retainer plate. They're the fixed pins, fixed pivots. Now I have to peel the first blades out slightly to allow me to access the pivot holes. And this is where it becomes more and more awkward. Trying to lift these blades into place without disturbing the blades you've already put in place. That's all the blades in position. Now I have to lift over the blades I've pulled back out of the way and swing them back into position, hopefully without disturbing their pivots that I've got. Hopefully those pivots are still sitting where they should do in that retainer plate. I'll pop that to side for 1 minute. I need to assemble these components together. I'll put a very slight wipe of molybdenum around the inside even less on that surface, and that's just so that the lever doesn't have an undue amount of friction when it's pulled against the case. I'm making sure I've got my setting lever at the bottom of the shutter case. The two cutouts in the case are at the top of the shutter. This piece goes on. The holes on either side here are countersunk slightly to take the heads of the screws. These little shoulder screws, the threaded end of them is quite small. The threads are of course quite fine. They're easily stripped out. So don't over tighten them, you'll strip them out. So now that when we move our setting lever on the side here, it can swing that plate backwards and forwards. In one position the aperture blades will be fully open. In the other position they'll be fully closed, or closed down as far as they go. Now we're back to the jig, and I have to get this over here, lining up the mounting holes where the retainer plate fixes to the case. And those pins on the blades must drop into the slots on this ring. My two mounting holes for the screws that hold the retainer plate to the case, two of them are close together at the bottom here. One's further apart there. Taking note of where they are relative to this screw head, end of the screw here I can see coming through. That's just to one side of it. See if I can lay that over the blades. Applying some light pressure and moving this slightly, I can feel those rivets dropping into their corresponding slots. I'll tip my jig upside down, remove the outer part of the jig and place that back underneath the case. Now I can see the screw holes for my retaining screws, and I'll get them into position. These screws I'll do one at a time, and I won't tighten them right up until they're all in place, and after I've also checked that the blades do swing in and out correctly. On later shutters, this procedure is slightly more convenient because you can fit your setting lever after you have the other components together. and have the retainer plate screwed into the case. Right, so I'll lift off that part of the jig and I will check. First thing I'm doing is looking to see that the pivots are all seated in the slot in the retainer plate. I'll run those screws down very lightly. And now I want to swing the setting lever, and I'm watching to see that I get a circular opening, and I don't. It's an egg shape. One of the blades is not picking up correctly. It means that one of the blades doesn't have its pin in the slot. I can see it actually, it's a blade over at this side. Let's see if I can nudge those blades. I felt something click in then. Now my opening is circular. Got a bit of white paper behind there so you can see. All the blades are swinging in and out smoothly. So I've achieved what I wanted to achieve there. That's moving smoothly. I can tighten my 3 screws. Blow out a little bit of dust. It's probably worth noting that the lever doesn't just run free. It's got a little bit of drag to it. That's good. You don't want to be disturbing your aperture settings accidentally. That resistance that I feel will be because this setting lever is not dead flat. It's got a bit of a bend in it which applies a bit of pressure at this point and this point against the case, just to provide some controlled friction. But the blades themselves are clean and smooth. There's no, they're not being distorted when I move the lever. Previously they were pushing up out of shape because they were stuck together. So our outer shutter case is good. We'll put that to one side. And deal with the mechanism plate. This has all been cleaned. The retard gear train is running nice and free. So I start by dropping in the blade actuating ring. If you were going to lubricate the blade actuating ring with a tiny smear of molybdenum paste or graphite grease even, very, very sparingly, you'd do it at this stage. I tend to just lubricate this assembly with a bit of graphite powder. Graphite powder has its detractors because the graphite may, the particles of graphite may actually cut into the aluminium apparently, aluminium being softer than the graphite. I haven't found it to be a problem. Now I've got 3 screws here, 2 longer ones, 1 shorter one. Just checking which is my longer and shorter ones, and checking that my long ones are in fact the same length. They appear to be. One of these positions, the screw will come through into a machined groove on the other side of the plate. Here, at this position. That position there needs the short screw. Otherwise the screw would foul the lever that runs down that groove. As always, get all 3 screws in position before you tighten anything up. I'll check that the mechanism, that's nice and free. There's no drag on that. That's good. I need to fit the lever that swings the blade actuating ring backwards and forwards. Typically I put a tiny smear of molybdenum in the pivot hole and in the slotted hole where it picks up the arm on the blade actuating ring. Just drop that into place. It's held with a single screw. Don't put much molybdenum on that component. You do not want a smear of molybdenum underneath that surface. It may cause drag. That's good. That snaps back into position promptly. That's exactly what's wanted. I'm going to lubricate this component now with a bit of graphite powder, and then after that I can assemble the rest of the shutter. Right, I've used a bit of graphite powder to lubricate the retard gear train and the blade actuating ring. I'm just going to unhook the spring from that lever, swing the lever out, which puts the blades in the open position, and start putting my blades back. The first blade has an extra hole here. Just checking, I got that round the right way. No, that's round the wrong way. It's moved on me. Busy assembling it round the wrong way here just to create a nuisance. That's better. These blades are generally in very good shape. There's some marks on them, nothing serious at all. If the surface of the blades had been rough from slight surface corrosion, or if they'd been very badly stained, I would have polished those blades with some Brasso. First, we don't need to do that today. Line up my mechanism plate, and I'm lining up the mounting holes. Got two holes here relatively close together, one much further apart on the other side. So that will be that one on the other side, these two fairly close together. So I can lower my outer case on. Line up the three screw holes and fit the three screws from the back of the shutter case running through to the mechanism plate. As usual, get all your screws fitted before you tighten them up. Check that that lever swings easily and that the blades swing in and out easily. Flicking that lever with the end of my tweezers, you can see the blades are prompt and snappy in their action. I'll apply a little touch of molybdenum paste onto my lever at those 2 points. And on the retard gear train at that point. And on that lever there. Now I can assemble the other components back into the shutter. This lever is held in with a shoulder screw. Make sure that the lever is moving freely on that screw. Nip that screw up. Don't over tighten it. If you over tighten it, effectively what you'll do is the shoulder on the screw will burrow its way into the aluminium mechanism plate and it will crush the lever, preventing it from being able to swing freely. So don't be heavy-handed doing that. Here I have the high speed spring, the 1/500th spring. I just put a little touch of molybdenum paste in there. We'll sit that over its post. Here we have this control lever. For the shutter, I'll just put a touch of molybdenum paste down its pivot. It sits on that post there. And we have to get its spring tucked down into the case. Oh yes, the spring is a little bit misshapen. It's preventing me tucking this all in neatly. That's better. That's tucked down into place. This is the B lever. It's all good. Here we have the latch that holds the shutter in the cocked position. See if I can drop that screw out for a moment. This is often awkward to get into position. The post on this lever drops into a hole in the mechanism plate. That hole on the mechanism plate falls right on a recessed machine edge. As a result, it's not always easy to insert that post squarely. It wants to go in cockeyed. The spring on the catch needs to run behind that lever. That's all good. I have my shutter release with a touch of lubricant in the molybdenum in the centre, which is the pivot. It picks up on that arm, and this catch here will block the action of the shutter release if the shutter's not cocked. If the shutter is cocked, it allows the action to continue and lift the catch off the cocking, the main lever. I've got to change my battery here, back shortly.